Hello, my allegorical aliens. Today I will be discussing the films of French director and animator René Laloux. This time I'll be going through the films chronologically and sort of weave the biography in with that, since René Laloux only made 3 feature films in his life, so I don't think a top 10 is as appropriate. But as before, I'll be talking about the premise, some interpretations, the reception, and also what I thought of it. So let's get on with it. René Laloux was born in Paris in 1929. As a child, he loved comics, drawing, and smoking, which he started at age 7. And he would often watch the French dubs of Walt Disney and Tex Avery cartoons at the cinema. At 13, he left school to train as a woodcarver with his uncle, who made Gothic reproductions of Jesus and Mary. At the same time, he attended painting classes in the evening, and of course this was all going on during the Nazi occupation of Paris, and I'm sure that influenced some of the anti-authoritarian messages that we will see recur in Laloux's filmography. At 27, he settled into a job teaching a painting class at a psychiatric clinic called Le Bourd in Courcheverny. This was a progressive open doors clinic that actually had principles reflecting Marxist-Leninist values, including that workers would alternate between intellectual work and manual labour. Patients were encouraged to take up therapeutic activities, and Laloux's painting class was considered a form of therapy. Laloux also introduced the group to shadow puppetry, being inspired by the work of Yves Joly, and over the course of a year, Laloux and the patients made the short film Tic Tac. It tells a wordless story of characters living in a strange town where objects are alive. Its imagery and sound design are chaotic and unnerving, especially with its anxiety-inducing tick-tock as the characters edge closer to danger. The film was bought and broadcast on primetime French television, and Laloux was able to receive financial backing for his next project, which would also be made with the patients, titled The Monkey's Teeth. This time the film would be made using stop-motion animation, using cut-out figurines. Laloux said that to find the subject of the film, they played that game where you sit in a circle and one of you says a word, the next person says a word, and you keep going until you have a complete story. The story they ended up with was that of a poor man with a toothache who goes to the dentist, not knowing the dentist steals the teeth of the poor to sell them to the rich. Laloux said that he had never since got so much pleasure from making a film, and that it was working with the mentally ill that was interesting and giving them a voice. And he said that it represented true freedom of expression. The film won the 1961 Emile Cole Prize, and it was at the ceremony for this that Laloux met Roland Topor, who was a graphic artist. And Topor would become the concept artist for some of Laloux's most famous work. And after meeting Topor, Laloux left his job at the clinic to pursue a career as an animator and director full-time. The first film Laloux and Topor made together was the short Dead Times, which is part stop-motion animation and part documentary. The images evoke war and death against a narration that describes the brutality of humans, so this film definitely has a more somber tone. It also shows people hunting birds and fish and contains a horrible bullfighting sequence. So not only is this film anti-militarist, but it's a look at humans' lack of empathy for other species, and this would become a central theme in some of Laloux's later works. Its cross-hatched graphic style, which looks like etching, became Laloux's trademark style, as seen in his most famous film Fantastic Planet. But before we get to that, Laloux and Topor made one more short together, The Snails, in which the tears of a gardener who is struggling to grow lettuces causes the lettuces to grow really big and the snails to eat them to grow freakishly enormous, causing absolute mayhem in the nearby cities. As with Dead Times, the cut-out figurines barely move at all. Laloux said that with American animation, it tends to be the drawings that suffer, but with Laloux's, they were very rich in terms of graphics, but suffered in terms of animation. Laloux said that if the idea is good, it gets you dreaming. The art of suggestion is superior to that of revelation. After the success of The Snails, producers approached Laloux and Topor asking them to make a feature film, and that film would become Fantastic Planet. Being a science fiction fan, Laloux persuaded Topor to work on an adaptation of the novel Hommes de Série by Stefan Wool. The film takes place on a planet where giant, technologically sophisticated aliens called Drags have captured tiny primitive humans, which they call Hommes, for use as pets, sparking an escalating rebellion that threatens to destroy both species. Fantastic Planet has been interpreted as an allegory for the rights of animals, the Algerian War, apartheid in South Africa, the civil rights struggle in the US, and it's hard not to think of the Holocaust when the drugs go about attempting to obliterate the entire human species with gas. The film was made in co-production with a studio in Czechoslovakia because the film needed to be made using hand-drawn paper cutouts, and that was a method used in Czechoslovakia and Eastern Europe a lot more than it was in the West. Another reason that this was made in co-production with Czechoslovakia is because they could pay the workers lower wages, and there was no way that this film would have been made or producers would have financed it had it been made entirely in France. And in fact, all of Laloux's feature films have been made in collaboration with a communist-ruled country for this reason. And when speaking about this, Laloux said that it's monstrous, totally immoral, but it's called the market economy. The look of this film, with its sparse backgrounds and etched cutout figurines, give the film a unique ambience, as does the unusual stop-motion pace and its electronic jazz mashup score. Because of the unique look of this film with all its etchings, it was very expensive to make. And at one point, the Czech animators stopped working because it was simply costing them too much. And for that reason, 4 sequences are actually missing from the final film. It didn't feel like anything was missing when I watched it the first time though. But then I found out that most of the sequences that were missing were towards the end of the film, and then I thought, it does kind of end a bit abruptly, but they do still have a finished film. And another issue that affected the production was that the Soviet Union invaded Prague in 1968 to suppress the Prague Spring. So this put production on hold for years, and a lot of the animators were actually afraid to work because they didn't think it would align with the Soviets' views. Nevertheless, in 1973, the film premiered at Cannes, and it was entered in the main competition, which was very rare for an animated film, and it would go on to win a special prize recognizing its singularity. So this was all very instrumental in changing attitudes about animation being solely an art form for children. After the film was finally released, Topor said that he didn't want to draw anymore, and Laloux said that the film's production had taken a huge toll on him psychologically, and he went through a long period of self-doubt because he thought that this had worked once but it wouldn't work again. But Fantastic Planet was actually a commercial success too, and it enabled Laloux to open his own studio, and there he was planning to make an animated TV series where each episode would have concept art by a different artist, and the first episode was to have art by Moebius. But this idea for a TV series was eventually scrapped, and the first episode would become Laloux's second feature film, Time Masters. Time Masters follows a young boy, Peel, who is stranded on a planet after a spaceship crashes. He's given a microphone that connects him to the crew of a spaceship on its way to save him, and the crew try to keep him out of danger via the microphone, since he's on a dangerous planet with killer hornets. I was a bit surprised by how fast-paced and action-packed this film is after watching Fantastic Planet, and I was a bit disappointed that it didn't have that same uneasy ambience. This film, it wouldn't really feel out of place on a Saturday morning cartoon show. And I think the issue is partly to do with the animation. So the concept artist for the film, Moebius, has worked on concept art for the films Alien and The Fifth Element. Laloux said that Moebius's realistic and remarkably elaborate style would have required a larger budget than what we had available. While I can consider the script to be excellent, I can't say the same for all the footage, for the character design, and for the animation. And while on the whole, I agree with that, there are still some very striking scenes. There's also more humour in this film than there is in Fantastic Planet, and it has those cute little side characters that you get in your typical family films. Sci-fi fans will also enjoy the philosophical element that comes into play later in the film when the crew encounter the race of Time Masters, which introduces ideas about how we should make decisions to help our future selves. I won't go too much into detail about that or I will spoil the whole film, but yeah, it has some deep moments. Laloux's next film was the short How Wang-Fo Was Saved, which is based on a story from the book Oriental Tales by Marguerite Yourcenar. So I read an LA Times review of this story calling it a clumsy Western exercise in Chinese storytelling, but it did say that it was also a charming way to ask, what is the nature of art and its relationship to life? And Laloux asks the same question in his adaptation. The artist Wang-Fo is summoned to see the emperor and is accompanied by his apprentice, from who the story is told. The emperor has never left the palace doors, and his idea of reality is what he's seen in Wang-Fo's paintings. When the emperor actually sees the real world, he becomes angry because it's not as beautiful as what Wang-Fo has painted. So I was trying to work out what exactly was being said in this film, and I was thinking about whether Wang-Fo had a responsibility to depict life as it is. And then I thought that maybe Laloux he's questioning the necessity of his own work. Is him making these animated films set in far-off worlds so disconnected from reality, but he is still clearly concerned with addressing issues that we experience. They're more like our world than they seem. The same year, Laloux released his third and final feature film, Gandahar, based on The Machine Men vs. Gandahar by Jean-Pierre André Von. The design for the film was by French comic book artist Kazaa, and it was animated by a studio in North Korea. I'm going to be talking about the French language version of the film and not the English dub, because the dub that Miramax produced cuts out a lot of scenes for being too sexual, which is stupid because reproduction is the central theme of the film. But I suppose they were trying to market it for children. So, in the film, the people of Gandahar have forsaken technology in favour of natural means, using birds for surveillance and sprouting seeds for weapons. Gandahar is under attack from mysterious steel men who turn victims into stone, so Queen Ambisextra of Gandahar orders our hero Sylvain to investigate. As he ventures to the outskirts, Sylvain encounters a number of deformed beings. We soon realise that this utopian society of Gandahar, where everyone is beautiful and they live in perfect harmony with nature, has come at a price. And these deformed beings are actually genetic experiments carried out by the Gandaharians that have gone wrong. One of those being the giant brain metamorphy. This giant brain is important. The metal men going around turning everyone into stone actually think that the giant brain, is their leader. And the brain doesn't really get why. He's like, I like Gandahar, but it's to do with something he tells them in the future. And so the message is like, oh, by carrying out all these genetic experiments, Gandahar is actually going to bring about its own downfall. So the film is essentially about the horror of genetic selection, and like Fantastic Planet, can be seen as an allegory of Nazism. Having said all that, I didn't actually like this film. The animation is very plain. It reminds me of He-Man. The dialogue is very straightforward and humorless and like very direct, like unnatural. It kind of feels like almost a parody because it's such a generic quest story with this masculine hero. It just feels kind of silly at times. It's weird. It's boring. I'm sorry, it's boring. Um, but by far the biggest disappointment is that Queen Amber Sextra, looking absolutely amazing on this cover, is in the film for all of like 3 minutes. Moving on to Laloux's final film, which is the short The Captive. Two children flee a world stricken by ash and death to reach a city whose inhabitants have become guardians of silence. They have banned all sound in the city, believing that noise is chaos and silence is order and harmony. One day a whale is washed up into the city, and out of the whale spring voluptuous women who open the city gates and let the sea flood in.
Heureusement, en fin de compte, l'ordre et le bâillon ne gagnent pas toujours.
So, we've got two kids overcoming a sort of authoritarian regime. And it's quite a nice, uplifting, hopeful ending, which is really nice. And I have to say, this film, I actually really enjoyed it. It's very short. But the whole time I was quite captivated. So now I've reached the end of talking about Laloux's films. So I'm just going to wrap up with a conclusion to wrap it all together. So Laloux's films visually are reminiscent of the 60s and 70s psychedelic art that was prevalent at that time. And the messages of his films reflect the ideologies associated with that aesthetic, like being opposed to collective identity, eugenics, dictators. And Laloux's feature films all ask questions about the future and utopias. Laloux said that animation is a creative act which precedes existence, the magic of extracting from nothing drawings which will not move until the moment of projection. The art of animation, in essence, is always linked to the future. And with that, I come to the end of my overview of the films of René Laloux. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about this very unique director. And let me know what you thought of these films, if you've seen any of them. So yeah, thank you for listening. I'll see you again soon. Bye!